Today we have two of the latest possible e-paper devices that are running Kaleido 3, and we're going to put them side by side. On the right we have the Era color by Pocketbook. On the left we have the Libra color by Kobo Rakuten. They're both 7 inches, they both have physical page turn buttons, and they're both awesome. They both have their own kind of unique spin on things. So let's dive in and see what is what. First off, you will notice that the Era color is significantly more sleek and just overall a better design. It looks less cookie cutter. It looks more like R&D went into this. You have some really nice 5-degree chiseled edges right here. You have some lengthwise lines or widthwise lines depending on which way you're considering holding it, and you have this little plastic bit that comes off and reveals some pogo pins. We're just going to leave it on because they didn't give us any accessories. It is very nice and well packed together. It does feel like this is more smartphone-y territory when it comes to the overall build. It's sealed up. You're not meant to open this and service this or any degree like that, and that will come in very useful later. We'll tell you about that. On the side you have the physical page turn buttons that are nicely laid, very classily kind of put off to the edge, and then you have a power button and a home button, flush screen and bezel. It says waterproof, has a smart light, etc. Oh, should also mention it has a speaker. Now the Kobo is a little bit more of a clunky design when placed up against the Era color. On its own it looks pretty cool, but honestly when placed against something that's very sleek like this, it just looks a little bit bulbousy. It has a chunkier build. It's made out of this kind of lesser than stellar plastic, although it is made from recycled materials, and it has a sunken screen and bezel, but the sunken screen and bezel is actually more of an advantage. We'll explain that later. Now why we said this is less kind of packed together is because this is not meant to be sealed off. As you can see, there's big seams everywhere. And why this is because this is actually repairable. Yes, you have the right to repair on this unit, which means things like the backing, the actual screen, the PCB motherboard, the battery, all of these components can actually be changed and repaired. If this breaks, you have to send this into Pocketbook, pay for the repair, and get a new one. That's the only thing you can do. You can actually repair little parts of this. If only my back breaks, I can buy a new one on iFixit. If my screen breaks, I can buy a new one on iFixit. Same with the battery. Say you use this for 6 years. You want to replace the battery, swap it in. You can't do that on this. So that's an advantage right there. The keys are a little bit clunky, and overall it is just more of a bigger build. So it's just going to come down to the individual consumer as to what they want. Let's dive in and look at some color content. To start things off, let us show you the glow light, because this is going to be pretty important. They're about 50% each, and you can see that this is significantly more gray. Let's go to full pop on both of these and check it out really quick. We will just do some side-by-sides. You will see that this is significantly more vibrant. It's also more colorful, and no, you don't have any way to really change the colors on these. This isn't like an Onyx or a Bigme where you have the drop-down e-ink center where you can go to vividness, you can go to contrast, saturation, etc. You don't have that color control on either of these, and we'll get into why this looks better in a second. Let's go over to the warm light or smart light and see how that looks. Again, this is looking just kind of dim and gray, whereas this looks really poppy. And there's nothing wrong with Pocketbook whatsoever. These guys are a massive company. A massive company that has existed for 17 years, and they have sold their devices to every side of the globe. Now, this is the Kobo Rakuten. These guys are part of the big three: Kobo, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. And the very important part of why this kind of looks better in a lot of situations is twofold. One, they don't have a flush screen and bezel. And why that's important is because when you have a flush screen and bezel, you have significantly more things in front of the actual screen, the EPD, the electronic paper display, and your eyes. So with that, the screen is further away from you. So there's a lot of things in front. You have different layers in front of the actual EPD. You have protective layers, you have the glow light layer, you have the color array filter, you have the touch digitizer, you have the glass, you have the top coat. There's so many more things. Whereas on the Kobo, they did two things. They did a sunken screen and bezel design, and not only that, when they were making the screen, they actually grabbed the color array filter and put it closer to the surface. And by doing that, you eliminate layers in front and you add vibrancy physically, not digitally. You physically add more vibrancy to the unit itself. So when you compare them side by side with other things in the same room at the same time, it actually looks better. And we'll do some exact same color content on both of these in just a second, but you will see that the colors actually look more rich and the display is less hindered on the Kobo. This is a mirror flip, but it is the exact same image. Now you will notice something in that the Kobo has significantly more depth and contrast layers than the Pocketbook does. With the Pocketbook, you get a lot of kind of blending around here and the highlights of the bird's hair. It just really doesn't give you that much depth compared to the Kobo. With the Kobo, you have a lot more highlights and lowlights, and the parts that are blended and blurred on the Pocketbook are not anymore so on here. And remember, neither of these can balance themselves. You can't go into either of these and change any of the parameters to make it look like the other. You can kind of do that on developer mode on the Kobo, but it's not an official way, and they actually advise you to not touch the waveform controller, etc. So for the average person buying into both of these in a retail environment, this is going to look a lot better. You lose some added features like onboard speaker audio, etc., but the colors in their base parameter presets look significantly better on the Kobo. And yes, to point out, this is the exact same shot. We'll point out a few more things that are glaringly obvious, at least with the naked eye, in that the blacks are actually blacker on the Kobo. Look at the character's mouth here, where you see in between the teeth there is a black space. It is significantly blacker here than the gray, kind of hazy black over here on the Pocketbook. These are both great in and of themselves, but when you actually put the screen side by side, you'll see how much more kind of filmy and hazy this is. Also, you can see a lot more reflection in here than you can on here. This is more just a shadow, but this is almost a reflection of my hand. And this comes from the glass screen on top. And the fact that they put, yes, it is a glass screen. Well, they diffuse that by putting an anti-glare screen protector, but that's just two additional more layers that they have on this than they do on the Kobo. So this is almost a more unhindered and less obstructed view of colors. The reds are richer over here as well compared to the tie on this gentleman, and the dotted pattern here is more pronounced. The whites are pretty much about the same, can't really show any gripes there, but basically everything outside of that does have any color applied to it looks significantly better on the Kobo. Outside of that, you guys can check out the end roll if you want to see the individual reviews on both of these, but we'll just go over a few things. You get the top drop down in sections here. You get the brightness, you get Wi-Fi, battery, synchronize, and search. On the Pocketbook, you don't have the individual sectioned off things. You get a true drop down, which I much more appreciate. I don't really like the individual icon based things. I would like to see my central hub, and that's what Pocketbook gives you. They give you everything here: dark mode, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and then you can go into settings. Pocketbook has tons of settings. We can't get into it. We're not going to get into it. They have key mapping, they have photo mode, they have extensive personalizations. It's just a lot of different settings. You can go to personalize and you just have so many things you can do: gestures, logos, open at startup, widget settings, etc. And remember, this has audio on board too, so you can get into audiobooks right out of the gates, and they preload audiobooks on here. If you click on that, you can go right over to audiobooks and just start listening to whatever is preloaded on here. And they actually do give you a lot of books as well. They sometimes, depending on the region and where you purchased it, you can get upwards of 100 books on here. Kobo doesn't really give you anything on the device right out of the gates. When you go to My Books, it will be empty. You have to populate it. You have to download things. You have to download samples. You have to sideload things in. But once you do, it's pretty good. They have a very extensive ecosystem on Kobo as well, so you don't have to worry about that. They have My Notebooks, Discover, and more. More is really good because they got Dropbox, they got Pocket, they got Google Drive, so there's a lot of things in here that they keep you busy with. Now there's one more thing we're going to touch on that we can't really get all that into because we did cover that on the review, is notebooks. If you get a Kobo pen, you can take notes on here. You kinda can on the Pocketbook as well if you go to Scribble, but you'll see that this is a true note-taking device as well, which basically, in a way, sets it in its own league aside from the Pocketbook. This has now been earmarked to become an e-reader, and this is now technically an e-note because it has stylus support. It doesn't always have to have Wacom. It can have active capacitive, much like this, which it does. It could have its own proprietary type, like the Sony DPT, and it is an e-note all the same. So this is now considered an e-note more so than an ebook reader, and you can drop the palette down here and choose your pen and choose your colors, etc. Now Pocketbook tries its best to keep up, and they have e-notes. They have the EO, they have the InkPad X Pro, so they have Wacom, which is arguably better than active capacitive. But in this particular circumstance, this isn't an e-note. You just have your fingertip. You could still get one of these pens, which is a capacitive pen, and use it to take notes, like so. But it's just not really that integrated with any sort of function because it's completely bare bones, and whether you use the pen or your fingertip, it's the same thing. And no, the pen doesn't work on here, whereas this is a true actual e-note. But again, hit up the end roll if you guys want to see the individual reviews on both of those. There really is no clear winner. They just both are so different. These guys are very similar in that they're using Kaleido 3. They both have physical page turn buttons. They're both 7 inches, but that's really where it begins and ends. They have different approaches to how they display color. They have different approaches to ecosystem. This has note taking. This has a speaker. It is just such a competition between these two companies, and I kind of feel that they trade hits when they do their releases because they come in these weird little step-by-step stages where each of them seemingly wait each other out to release the next thing. This is the comparison between the Kobo Libra Color and the Pocketbook Era Color.